Welcome to Neo Self-Care, the podcast where we explore the different facets of a woman's life and the importance of taking care of oneself. My name is Vashti Ma'a, and I'm here to take you on a journey of discovery where we'll delve into topics such as femininity, mental health, career, parenting, relationships, and of course, self-care. Let's create a space where we can be honest and vulnerable and support each other on our quest for personal growth and well-being. Hello and welcome to Neo Self-Care. I'm your host, Vashti Ma'a. This week we are going to be talking about the importance of having and establishing boundaries. As women, we often struggle to set boundaries, whether it's in our relationships, at work, or in our personal lives. But having clear boundaries is crucial for our mental and emotional well-being, and it can also improve our relationships and careers. So let's dive in. We're going to split this episode up in 3 parts. Same episode, different parts that I want to hit on, all right? So for part 1, we're going to talk about understanding boundaries. So what exactly are boundaries? Boundaries are like invisible lines that we set around ourselves, defining what is and isn't okay in our relationships and interactions with others. They can be physical, emotional, or even mental, and they are unique to each individual. So for example, you may have a boundary around physical touch, where you only allow certain people to hug you. Or you may have a boundary around your time, where you only work a certain number of hours each day. It's important to know that boundaries are not meant to limit or restrict your freedom, but rather to protect your well-being and give you control over your life. By setting boundaries, you are communicating what you need, what you're comfortable with, and what is unacceptable to you. This allows others to know where they stand and helps you to avoid conflicts and misunderstandings. So let's get into part 2. Why are boundaries so important? So why are boundaries so important? Well, for starters, they help to maintain your self-esteem and your self-worth. When you have boundaries in place, you're telling yourself and others that you're worth protecting, that you have value, and that you deserve respect. And this helps to build your confidence and your resilience. Secondly, boundaries are essential for healthy relationships. When you have clear boundaries, it becomes easier to communicate with others and to establish healthy and meaningful relationships. So for example, if you have a boundary around your time, you can let others know when you're available and when you're not. This can help to avoid conflicts and misunderstandings, and it also helps to build trust and respect. And let's not forget to mention that when you have boundaries around your time, you're not willing and openly setting yourself up for something that you really don't want to do. Lastly, having boundaries can improve your career. When you have clear boundaries around your work, you're able to focus better and be more productive. You're also able to avoid burnout and to maintain a healthy work-life balance. And when others know what you're comfortable with and what is unacceptable, it can help to improve your relationships with coworkers and supervisors, and even advance your career. How many times have you been in a workplace where people are always crossing your boundaries? But then you really got to stop and think, have you ever expressed those boundaries to people? Have you ever told somebody what you expected? Have you set the tone for how you deserve to be treated? Part 3 is really about how to establish boundaries. And this is where the basis of our podcast is really going to go. So, how do we establish boundaries? Well, the first step is to get to know yourself. You need to understand what you're comfortable with and what is unacceptable. And this requires some introspection and self-reflection. So take some time to think about what makes you happy, what stresses you out, and what do you need to be healthy and what do you need to be healthy and happy? I was saying happy and healthy at the same time. So what does this look like? Grab a journal, grab your computer, grab your iPad, and write out things that really make you happy. Think about the things that make you cringe. Think about the things that stress you out. If you cannot think of something, think back on old conversations. Think back on people who you spoke to. What have these people done or said that made you feel just a bit uncomfortable? What have these people done or said that made you tense up or made you, have to do a sigh, a frustration, right? And if you can't go back in your past and think about it, start looking at your future experiences and moments with people to figure out what made me feel good about this conversation and what made me feel not so good. By doing that, you're really allowing yourself to get a full understanding of, okay, I like when people talk like this. I don't like when people do that. So I'll use me for an example. I love to have conversations with people when we can talk and when they're actively listening to me and I am actively listening to them, and it is a conversation. The key word here is conversation. I do not like to argue. I do not like to yell and scream. That is unacceptable to me. So I know from the jump, when someone starts to raise their voice, I will express that their tone is uncomfortable to me, or I don't appreciate the way that they're talking to me, so that the tone can go back to neutral and so that we can actively hear each other out. That's a boundary for me. That's a boundary that I set for myself. So the question is, what are boundaries for you? What makes you happy and healthy? So once you have a good understanding of yourself, the next step is to communicate your boundaries to others. Now, this can be done in a variety of ways, such as through direct communication, setting boundaries in writing, or even through your actions. And it's important to be clear, consistent, and firm when you're communicating your boundaries. So, what does this look like? I kind of gave you an example when I was speaking about myself, whereas if I'm in a conversation with somebody and they're starting to make it into an argument or they start to raise their voice, I will say, hey, I don't appreciate you raising your voice, or me saying, I don't feel as though you're respecting my boundaries because you're raising your voice when I'm trying to have a calm, neutral conversation, right? So you have to find, how can you communicate your boundaries to other people? What makes you feel good? Now, this is a tricky part because sometimes when you're establishing your boundaries and telling people about your boundaries, depending on how triggered the other person may be, they may lash out at you, making you feel like you're wrong or something was wrong with you expressing your need. And that's where your resiliency and your discipline really has to kick in, because no one should make you feel like something's wrong with you expressing yourself, you expressing your emotions, you expressing your feelings. But that's a whole nother conversation for later. Lastly, it's important to be flexible and willing to adjust your boundaries as needed. So let's say that you have a certain boundary, but you're noticing that this one particular boundary is really shutting everybody off. Now, I'm not saying that you have to take away your boundary, but, look and examine to see, could this boundary be a bit compromised? If you're just like, I don't like talking to anybody, my boundary is that I don't want to talk to nobody, really ask yourself, is that really sustainable? Can you go the rest of your life without talking to anyone? And the answer is going to be no, because you need to talk to people in order to answer certain questions you have. You need to talk to people when you go to the grocery store and they tell you how much it is and you want to know if they take Apple Pay or not. You have to talk to people. So if you are noticing that perhaps your boundaries are not being respected, and not because a certain person doesn't want to respect them, but if you're noticing that no matter what you do, your boundaries are never being respected, then it may be time for you to kind of pull back a little bit and ask yourself, can I change this? How can I change or be flexible enough with my boundary to where I'm still respecting myself, but yet allowing for other people to also come a bit closer. Maybe not too close, but just a bit closer. You know what I mean? So, in conclusion, establishing healthy boundaries is an important part of self-care and personal growth. It helps to protect your well-being, it helps to improve your relationships, and enhance your career. But it's also important to remember that boundaries are not meant to limit your freedom or restrict your ability to connect with others. Instead, they are meant to give you control over your life and to help you live a happier, more fulfilling life. So, take some time to reflect on your own boundaries, communicate them clearly, and be willing to adjust them as needed. So that's all for today's episode of Neo Self-Care. I hope you found it informative and inspiring. Remember to take care of yourself and always prioritize your mental and emotional well-being. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite platform. And please don't forget to share it with your friends and to subscribe to our show. Until next time, take care and stay connected.